Hey everyone, welcome. Today I'll be talking about building an engaged DAO. Nice to see you all. Let's jump right into introductions so that you know why you should listen to me. So I'm head of people and then more recently governance lead at Everclear. There was previously Connext. Everclear is the first clearing layer and it coordinates settlement of liquidity between chains, solving fragmentation for modular blockchains. We just did our big testnet launch earlier this week, so make sure to check it out. But back to me, my experience has been in people and talent space. And then I also have Masters of Industrial Organizational Psychology from the University of Georgia. And why this is important? My main focus really is company culture, motivation, and engagement. And my master's really helps me combine practical experience with the scientific approach as well. Why am I talking about DAOs, you may ask? Well, I think that we can all agree with more traditional companies, there are some poor experiences, and I do think, as many others do, that DAOs offer fresh perspective. I think that DAOs are more of a social experiment right now. There are some problems to solve, but if we continue working on this, I think we can have a future where DAOs really allow people to work differently. Another reason why I'm really excited to share my experiences on this talk is a lot of times you can see, 5 men talking about DAOs in very technical, very hard to understand way. And I think there is a way to actually build DAOs in simple terms and talk about them in simple terms. So I kind of want to share how DAOs can be set up and kept going in simple ways. So let's jump right into it. This is the overview. These are some of the topics that we will cover today. The first one is community building. Important to mention here, Everclear, previously Connext, has been around for many years. So it was founded in 2018. We were bridging and focusing on chain abstraction long before it was cool. So although we have a very small core team of just 20 people, we have a pretty big network of contributors, developers who are working on top of us and collaborating with us. So I would say community was mostly built. And when we were preparing for launch, for the DAO launch and the token launch, we wanted to do call for delegates to obviously build a good group of delegates to work with. Running a DAO without delegates, in my opinion, is really hard, but to each their own. So what we did in Call for Delegates, we kind of took this two-level approach, bottom-up and top-down. Bottom-up means that we pretty much try to amplify this Call for Delegates in every single media outlet that we had, on Discord, on Telegram. We really wanted to reach every single person that has any interest in now Everclear, previously Connext, and can bring their opinions and their thoughts and kind of push the whole ecosystem forward. So any person that was in any way engaged or just used the bridge previously could apply to become a delegate. And then also top-down approach is that our founders invited some thought leaders in the space that we already know and have relationship with to also apply and become delegates. Some of them did, some of them have been extremely helpful and extremely engaged so far. And what I think this created is pretty good diversity. I know that this diversity is like this, a term that some people think is really valuable, some get frustrated with it, but what research shows is that diversity does lead to better decision making. And I can definitely kind of witness that now the last 10 months. Initially, when we were making decisions, when we were talking about things, it was kind of hard to have so many thoughts, so many opinions. But over time, teams get used to working with each other, and then we really do have better decisions over the last 10 months. Moving on to the next topic, governance process. DAOs need extremely simple governance process to actually function. In terms of preparing for the launch, again, we needed to have some document that outlines how decisions are made initially. And I did some research preparing for it. I researched DAOs like HOP, ENS, Arbitrum, and so on, and came to the conclusion that we should have process that consists of an RFC, temperature check, and then formal vote. Very quickly, after launch, after documents were available, delegates started sharing their thoughts around what a process should look like. It was kind of funny to see how many polarized opinions there were, if we should have temperature check, if we should not have it, how long the vote should be, and so on. And we obviously had the first vote, the first temp check and the first vote was actually deciding on how long the formal vote is going to take. So delegates decided to remove temperature check in our case. So our current process is a 7-day request for comments. Sometimes it takes longer, most of the time it's 7 days. And then we go straight to formal vote with some delays before the execution. As you can see, we do not have temp check. And kind of looking back at the last 10 months, I don't think we missed it. Honestly, it just never came up in discussions. So if you're thinking about governance process, building it out these days, consider not having temp check. I don't think it helps much. Next topic, listening. I want to cover communication tools here. Again, 10 months ago, setting up the DAO, I was kind of asking those questions. What do we need to have? What do we need to have to kind of get the DAO running? One answer was good communication tools. In this case, I would say we have a pretty simple setup as well. We obviously have forum where all the RFCs and votes and all the discussions take place publicly. We do have Discord where we announce all the news related to the DAO, like new RFCs and new votes and so on. We have DAO delegates Telegram group where we also post those updates to make sure that people are aware of everything taking place. And then we also have monthly delegates calls where we discuss, again, RFCs, votes, any conflicts, and so on. Why am I calling this slide listening and not communication tools? Well, because I think listening is extremely important. There is this term in workplace psychology that is called employee listening or employee voice. And employee listening pretty much entails getting often feedback from employees about what motivates them, why they're engaged, why they're not engaged, what are some of the problems that they have. And really taking this approach of proactive listening in more traditional companies and in the DAOs is really, really important for engagement in my experience. There are always some delegates that are going to have difference of the opinion if you kind of compare to what everybody else thinks. And I actually think that to promote that diversity of thought, it's actually really important to praise any engagement, to praise any opinion that you get, as long as it's constructive. In any DAOs, I'm sure that you experience it, there are people who share, let's say, negative feedback that is not constructive, which is not ideal. To those, I do not always respond, but as long as it's constructive, I will praise that, I will thank them for engagement, I will ask them to contribute more, as that really, really does keep people engaged long term. Autonomy. This kind of flows well from the previous slide. Going into decentralized organization for us as a core team, what was really important is that we progressively decentralized, and that my role as a governance lead becomes a lot smaller over time. 10 months later, I'm not as involved day to day, but what I did initially, I knew that I had to support initial proposals, I needed to support initial decision-making process and just do everything to make sure decisions are being made and DAO is moving forward. What I still did, while doing that, I definitely tried to balance the work that I do and then also the space that I create for others to contribute. I didn't want to do everything for everybody because that's just not a way to decentralize. That's not a way to start slowly from the day one, removing yourself. Another thing I did to support this, I didn't just, leave gaps and leave space and not do anything about it. I also started connecting with our delegates. I pretty much scheduled calls with some of them. They were very engaged to really identify their potential, assess their skills, areas of interest, ask them questions. And asking them questions is the most important takeaway here. Funny thing happens when you ask people questions. They feel valued, they want to share more, they are really willing to open themselves up and share ideas and share their experiences, which is really crucial. You don't need delegates if you're not going to listen to them. So essentially, 10 months later, as I said, my day-to-day role is a lot smaller. Delegates are very autonomous, very independent in what they do, in decisions that they make. They are going to ping me from time to time if they need something from the foundation in particular, but most of the time they just do stuff independently. A really good example I want to share here is Governance Task Force. There is a formal vote that seems like it's going to pass today or tomorrow, and hopefully we will be going to elections next. What Governance Task Force is? Well, it's really this task force that will take governance lead role, decentralize it further into a couple of different roles with some additional added tasks that are going to fill those gaps that we had initially and are really going to push governance operations to the next level. What is really impressive about this is that I didn't have anything to do with this. One of the delegates brought the whole idea. I did comment on it. I did give my feedback, but it's completely independently, DAO is the centralizing role of the governance lead, which is really awesome to see after only 10 months. Values. I left values for almost the end on purpose. All the values are really important thing to discuss. So you may all know the values do define company culture. And for example, looking back 2 years ago when I joined Everclear, previously Connext, I was talking to the founders about how do we maintain company culture as we scale. That was the main question. That was the main reason that they wanted to hire someone like me to lead talent and people function. So the first thing I pitched to them was values. If you have company values, if you as founders, you as leaders are actually behaving in such a way that is in line with those values, that will be perceived as from employees and from everybody else, and those values are going to be what keeps your culture going as you scale. Values, in my opinion, although are slightly harder to implement into DAOs, can also be glue of decentralization, in my opinion. In general, I don't think values should be a part of constitution. You cannot really enforce people to follow your values, but you can have code of conduct or some code of conduct or something similar where values are outlined and discussed. What we did, looking back, is not too much, but I can see now that the results of it are good. So the first thing we did in the previously mentioned call for delegates, we had something that could be identified as value statement. We essentially asked all the delegates in their application to state what is their vision for the DAO and what are their goals for their participation. Through that, you can really see how they see the DAO, what their values are. Even in my experience, in particular, when I was looking who I'm going to delegate my voting power to, I noticed one specific delegate that talked about how he sees the DAO and what values he thinks the DAO should have. And I delegated my votes to him. He still doesn't know that he has majority of my votes. But the funny thing is, working with all the delegates 10 months later, we've always had alignment when it comes to the opinion without needing to discuss it. And this is really what matters. And having delegates represent values of the token holders is really what they're there for. So having something like that in call for delegates is extremely helpful. Other thing already mentioned more in the let's say realm of company culture is leading by example. There are no leaders to the DAO, there's just contributors. There are people that are maybe more visible than the others, but it's still important to lead by example. You need to behave in line with values that you want the DAO to have. This also means making sure that voice community is always amplified. There are delegates who might not have as much voting power, but whose opinion really, really matters. And it's really important to give them space to speak up, to call out issues, as that actually means integrity. And I do want to say, like, again, looking back, 10 months later, I think the delegates have called us out a couple of times on a few things that may not be 100% in line with the values. It was a discussion, and it was really good discussion. So I think we're also doing well in this department. And then the future outlook. I already said DAOs are a social experiment right now, but I do see DAOs as future work in a few years from now. And the question is, what needs to happen, in my opinion, in my experience, to bring DAOs to that level? The first thing is diversity. We're really lucky that our delegates have a lot of diversity in terms of backgrounds, location, thought, experience, and that's why we're making better decisions. However, considering this is a protocol DAO, when you look at gender diversity, I don't think we're doing great. We need to do better. And that is one of the reasons that I wanted to do this talk. Again, I'm tired of being at conferences where 5 men are constantly having a panel about DAOs and speak in technical ways that are super complex. I wanted to take a different approach and hopefully talk about DAOs in simple ways. The second important point is long-term engagement, pretty much the topic of this talk. It's very easy to have an engaged DAO in the early days. Right after launch, right after airdrop, people are hyped about the token, they're hyped about everything they're doing. A few months later, a lot of them drop off. You know, they have jobs, they're not paid for what they do, they have other stuff to do. And thinking about long-term engagement is really important. For me, it's like, I would say it's still early days for us, 10 months, but long-term, this will be a challenge. There are a couple of ways to solve this. There are some incentives for delegates and for their participation. Thoughts are very polarized, again, about this. If you ask certain delegates what they think about it, they're like, yeah, you know, people should get tokens or something like that for voting. Some other people think that no, absolutely not. Why would you pay delegates for just participating? I'm still thinking what is the best way to do this. We did not include any kind of incentives right now, but we might long term. As we grow, definitely interested in hearing other people's experiences when it comes to this. Paid contributions. Another really important thing to do, as the DAO grows, there are going to be sub-DAOs or task forces, the governance task force that I mentioned, that in order to be efficient, should be paid. It should basically be paid roles that might not take them, not full-time, they might be just a few hours per week, but they should be paid. And one of our delegates, kudos to them, L2Beat, they have been advocating for this from the very beginning of the DAO. And I have to say that we've kind of learned on our experience that if those task forces are paid, you can actually have expectations, you can have KPIs, you can ask for detailed report outlining what was achieved, and this really is a good way to push DAO to become more efficient. Better tools. Thinking about DAO tooling, there's a lot of space to make improvements. We currently use a Snapshot for votes, and then we use OSNAP tool. Kudos to Uma and OSNAP team for developing this. It works pretty well if you're doing simple transactions in executable proposals that are just, you know, mainnet to mainnet transfer. However, as Everclear is a clearing layer and is concerned with chain abstraction, we really wanted to have a cross-chain DAO immediately. So whenever we have to do an executable proposal that transfers assets from maybe mainnet to Arbitrum to fund a task force or something like that, it's really complex to create a transaction. I'm not very technical. I have to reach out to an engineer to make sure that everything's right. So that's one tool that I immediately would love to have. I think that what recently happened is that there was integration of OSNAP with Tenderly, which is awesome, that people can now simulate simple transactions. But there's definitely a lot of space for improvements here. Preparing for scale. Final thought today is that as DAOs grow, as the treasury of the DAOs grow, there are usually more grants. There's a lot of politics that starts happening because there's a lot of money flowing around. And it's really important to think about the structure preparing for scale. Again, my experience with more traditional companies, you have to think about where this thing might be going and how to set up this rocket ship to actually succeed as more and more people try to come in and contribute. Again, having some of the things that we outlined here, like values, simple governance process, good communication tools is really important. But then also thinking about the structure, maybe one mainnet multisig or main multisig that is, let's say, the main DAO, and then a bunch of sub-DAOs could be very well the solution. However, that does include a lot of additional operational roles to really keep things going. And that's about it. When it comes to sharing my thoughts, I hope that this was valuable to you, and I hope this is kind of shedding some light on the DAOs in a way that is simple and easy to understand. Happy to chat later or answer any questions if there are any right now. No questions? Awesome. Thank you all for your attention. It was a pleasure being in Belgrade today. Bye-bye.